The world thought the skies were already owned by giants. Then, a small nation, with no superpower army, no massive budget, and no global dominance, built something that changed everything. They called it Gripen, and what this tiny jet exposed, the US military would rather you never knew. For years, the United States ruled the air. The F-22 and F-35, symbols of technological supremacy, invisible to radar, linked by advanced data systems, billions spent to ensure American pilots always had the first shot. The message was clear. If you weren't flying an American jet, you were flying second place. But thousands of miles away, in the calm precision of a Swedish lab, a quiet rebellion was brewing. While others built complexity, Sweden built clarity. While others chased power, Sweden chased intelligence. The Saab Gripen wasn't born from ego. It was born from necessity. A fighter designed by a small country that knew it could never match the US in money or manpower. So, it had to win differently, and when it did, it revealed something the world's biggest air force didn't want anyone to see. Let's rewind. Since the early 2000s, the F-35 program had one mission: dominate the skies for the next 50 years. It was supposed to replace nearly every frontline jet in NATO. Stealth, supersonic, unbeatable. But as costs ballooned and delays piled up, something became painfully clear. The F-35 was too expensive to lose, and too fragile to fight like a workhorse. It required massive air bases, special fuel, and endless maintenance. Even in training, some couldn't fly half the time. And that's when Gripen entered the story. A jet that could do the opposite. It could take off from a highway, be refueled in 10 minutes, and be ready for combat again before the F-35 finished its system checks. When NATO exercises brought the two together, nobody expected fireworks. The Gripen wasn't even considered in the same class. It was lighter, cheaper, a so-called budget fighter. But during those joint drills, something unexpected happened. Gripen's pilots started seeing things, signals, patterns, threats, before others could. Its network-based sensors were sharing data faster than anyone thought possible. It was feeding live information between aircraft, ships, and ground systems in real time. The Americans were watching closely, because this wasn't supposed to happen. How could a small Swedish jet detect, adapt, and coordinate faster than a machine that cost 10 times more? Behind closed doors, analysts started realizing the uncomfortable truth. In some scenarios, Gripen's system architecture, its brain, was more advanced than even America's top jets. While the F-35 depended on complex centralized networks that the US controlled, Gripen operated like a swarm, decentralized, flexible, unstoppable. Every Gripen could be its own command post, sharing and receiving intelligence without relying on a single main server or US software permission. That meant no backdoors, no dependency, complete sovereignty. And that's the secret the US military didn't like being exposed. Because if countries realized they could have NATO-level power without American control, that would change everything. Critics laughed at first. They said, sure, it's clever, but it's no stealth jet. They said, you can't outthink the F-35. But the numbers didn't lie. In training scenarios across Europe, Gripen pilots consistently achieved radar locks on opponents before being detected. It wasn't about brute strength. It was about brains. The Swedish system called TIDLS, Tactical Information Data Link System, let Gripen pilots see through each other's sensors. If one Gripen spotted an enemy, they all knew instantly. No delay, no hierarchy. Imagine a school of fish moving as one. That's Gripen. And while others needed satellite links and command approval, Gripen just acted. It wasn't just tactics, it was philosophy. The US built its fighter to control allies. Sweden built its fighter to empower them. Gripen wasn't made for domination, it was made for independence. And nations started to notice. When Brazil signed its deal for Gripen, it wasn't just buying jets. It was buying freedom from American software locks and restrictions. Brazil could modify the jet, upgrade the weapons, and customize its code. That's something the F-35 doesn't allow, ever. For the first time, smaller nations saw a path to world-class air power without being tied to Washington. That's when the US began to panic quietly, because the Gripen didn't just challenge their jets, it challenged their business model. Every F-35 sold brings decades of dependence, spare parts, software updates, weapon certifications, all through the US. But a Gripen sale? It gives a nation total control over its defense. The Pentagon doesn't like losing control, so they tried to bury the story. They downplayed the Gripen's capabilities, mocked its non-stealth design, and flooded the media with flashy F-35 footage. But pilots talk, and word spread fast. From Canada to Finland, from Czechia to India, militaries began asking the same question. Do we really need the most expensive jet or just the smartest one? Then came the NATO exercise that sealed the legend. It was supposed to be routine, mixed aircraft drills, nothing dramatic. But once again, the Gripen E turned heads. It tracked stealth aircraft using tactics no one expected. By networking data between radar systems and electronic sensors on the ground. It didn't see the stealth jet directly, it outthought it. One Swedish pilot later said, "Stealth makes you invisible to one radar, not to teamwork." That line summed it all up. While the US invested billions to hide, Sweden invested millions to outsmart. And when the reports came in, there was no denying it anymore. Gripen had exposed the vulnerability of modern air power. That too much dependence on stealth and centralized systems can be a weakness. In an age of electronic warfare, adaptability beats invisibility, and the Gripen was built for that future. The aftermath was seismic. Countries began quietly revising their defense strategies. Canada, once locked into the F-35 deal, faced political pressure over Gripen's lower cost and independence. Brazil celebrated its new production lines and local upgrades. Even the US Air Force started exploring smaller, modular aircraft concepts, almost eerily similar to Sweden's approach. The Gripen didn't just compete, it inspired. For Sweden, it was never about humiliating the US. It was about proving a principle, that innovation doesn't need a trillion-dollar budget. While the F-35 program became a symbol of over-engineering, Gripen became a symbol of smart design. Simple, swift, sovereign. And maybe that's what the US wanted to keep under wraps. The idea that a small, neutral country could expose the cracks in the most expensive weapon system ever made. Today, the Gripen E continues to evolve. It's faster, smarter, and deadlier than ever, but still loyal to its roots: efficiency, independence, and adaptability. And while superpowers keep throwing money at complexity, Sweden quietly builds what the future of warfare will look like. A connected, agile, thinking machine. The kind that never needed to hide. So the next time someone tells you the skies belong to the biggest spender, remember this story. A tiny country, a modest budget, and a jet so smart it made the world's most powerful military nervous. Not because it was louder, not because it was faster, but because it exposed something they didn't want to admit, that in the new age of air combat, brains beat budgets. And once again, it was the smallest jet that made history. Sweden didn't build the biggest fighter. They built the truth.